Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from yarxperifantasyart.com and welcome to another illustration video tutorial. So for this week's tutorial, the request was that I actually show my drawing process as well as how I actually use reference in order to actually draw vehicle designs. Now, I will show that at the end of the video, how I actually do some internet searches, what type of reference material I'll pull up depending on what I'm drawing. But for now, what I can tell you is I can give you the name of some of the reference books that I do use. I'll just give you the reference names of the books that I do use when I'm actually drawing vehicle designs. It does depend on what style I'm actually drawing for vehicles, but generally what I tend to use is concept art books to get a rough idea, but from there I start working out my own designs based off actual references, life references. So when I'm trying to look for a visual style, I'll generally look at other people's interpretation of vehicle designs, and I'll actually search for concept art online. One of my favorite books is The Art of Terminator Salvation by Tara Bennett. I will try to put the link below to Amazon where I actually got this book in case you guys do want to pick it up. I do like this book for a variety of reasons, but I mainly enjoy this book because of the vehicle designs that are actually produced. Now, most of the designs that are actually produced in this book do use a different process than what I use. Most of the concept art that's actually designed here is actually a composition of actual photos that have been essentially collaged together along with some actual painting techniques. So that is different than what I actually generally use. I actually generally paint the entire thing. If you're trying to save time, you can do that, but just be wary that you have to worry about copyright infringement if you don't take the photos yourself at least. It does depend on how similar the objects end up looking. If it's a transformative piece, then it would be tremendously less. So once I know the general style, like I said, I'll look up some reference material, but sometimes I'll actually look up some really random stuff to get just a start off on a silhouette design. Now, the original silhouettes that you saw me actually just recently paint, I literally looked up cleaning equipment. So the original silhouettes were actually quite different, but then I did change them obviously because they needed to look more ship-like. So as you can see right now, I'm taking the silhouettes that I originally started off with and just working out some of the details in grayscale first. The main focus is the silhouette of the ships, so all the rest of the detail is considered secondary until I at least achieve a very interesting silhouette. I am also trying to find a very interesting structure for the spaceships, so as I'm working on the silhouettes, I'll begin adding some more interesting silhouette elements, trying to break it up further, all the while adding some level of detail as well. So this entire process for these three ships took about 5 to 6 hours to complete. So it wasn't that long, mainly because I was just focusing on the spaceships and I was doing multiples at the same time. And once again, like I said, I started off with cleaning equipment, like machines, before I actually started working on these drawings. But generally, as you're working with something and you start realizing, okay, I don't find this aspect of the silhouette very interesting, so I'm going to modify it, I'm going to change it. You start variation your design quite a bit from the original content that you've used, and that's generally a natural process because essentially you're looking for something as interesting as possible as your final design, unless you're going for a more simplified version, which is also possible, but generally I don't normally draw simplified versions of ships just because they're not as interesting. If you can draw something complicated, then you can normally do pretty good. Now, another key tool that I'm using for this is I am using my perspective grids by using the polygon tool. However, I'm using this very loosely. I start off with it, but I ended up turning it off for most of these drawings, just because as I'm working this out, it's good not to get too limited on the perspective, at least when you're trying to get the actual idea for the ship. Once you actually have the idea for the ship, you don't necessarily need to know that if you have enough experience drawing ships or various other elements, because it will naturally come to you to a certain degree. It is different though if you're actually trying to place this in a background, because in that case I would definitely make sure that the ship design does follow closely with the background elements. But since it's not something I'm worried about at this moment in time, it's not really all that necessary to worry about it. So I'm just adding some areas where essentially the engines could bring in material and expel it onto the back end. So essentially these are just ventilation areas mainly used when these ships are more in an atmosphere type setting rather than space. Now the key thing to adding detail is to know when to add it and when not to add it. So essentially I'm going in, adding extra detail, but almost immediately I'm softening out that information just to make sure that it's not overly detailed and that the lines aren't too harsh, and so that the lighting does appear to be correct in these designs. And it is something I keep on repeating for most of these just because it helps ensure that it makes a more appealing design. Now, the texture that you see me adding to most of these ships, this is actually done with a brush that essentially all I did was increase the size fairly large, and it gives me more of a speckled brush type look to it, and I'm able to use that as essentially a texture rather than going online and grabbing something from an actual photo. So that's a really quick workaround that I've found over the years. And the nice thing about using this technique is essentially I don't normally have to worry about copyright infringement unless I'm using somebody else's brushes that they designed themselves and that they're actually selling. The brushes I'm actually using on this were posted free online by Darkin, who's another artist that I do enjoy looking at his pieces. He has very tremendously beautiful pieces for character designs. So I actually do use some of his brushes. I've since created some of my own based on my current drawing abilities and also my current style of drawing. So right now I'm just doing a quick test on colors to see roughly what colors I'm going to go with. I kind of like what I had in that. So for now though, what I'm doing is I'm just going to work out the last ship before I actually start finalizing all the colors as well as the exhaust system and all that as well. Once again, strong emphasis on the silhouette of these ships. That's a huge focus for these designs. Generally, before I spend any time adding any form of detail, I'll generally try to figure out or at least get a rough idea of the silhouette before I work on anything else. Just because I don't have the luxury of spending too much time on these pieces, so I need to get something done very quickly, but it still needs to look really good. So by doing this, I achieve a better overall effect, and it looks more professional too. So once again, I'm adding that texture with that brush and just working out some of those additional details and adding the exhaust system. I'm just switching between these two right now just to make sure that they still tie in together as looking from the same essentially species or race that's actually created them. Just trying to get a really clean design. You'll see me change quite a bit of the back of the ship, simply because I don't like the current design. It looks too minimalistic for something that's so large. So I do end up changing it quite a bit, just to make it look more appealing. So we're almost done the actual painting of all these three ships. So I will be jumping in very shortly to how I actually do the referencing on Google. Generally what I'm doing too is as I'm referencing this information, I actually have a separate computer from which I'm referencing my information, but my work computer is separate. And essentially what I'm doing is I have my reference material on right next to me the entire time that I'm working. And as I'm working, I'm just referring back to it, scrolling down the images. I've disabled the zooming animation that's normally available through my laptop, simply because I don't need it. I need to just be able to see general information, or if I need to expand information, I'll actually go to the source where the image was actually originally posted. So by doing this, I have very few resources, but yet I have a very global access to all the information. So right now I'm actually just typing in concept art for spaceships, and I'm making sure that this is an image search that I will be going into, and essentially these are the examples that I'm using. Now, although these examples all have very specific styles to them, I wanted my spaceships to be slightly different. So I took this information and changed essentially how I was going to approach the actual design aspect. I did experiment with some lighting, so I looked up city at night to try and get some of the lighting. I didn't like that, so I ended up not keeping it in the recording, but I did need some reference for essentially the torches and the spaceship exhaust essentially in the back for the flame, so I referenced that there. If you want to have your say on what's drawn for next week's video tutorial, or have some additional questions about my drawing process, please leave a comment below. I will take the feedback you guys give me and try to answer your questions while working on next week's painting. If you want to see some of my previous works, please feel free to check out the annotations on the side of this video, or visit my channel for the full playlist. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you and take care.